Welcome to another video, Purple Political Talk here. Today is Monday, September 6th, 2021, also known as Labor Day, so happy Labor Day to all of you while watching. And today we're going to be discussing the 2024 presidential election, and I wanted to do an update on the Trump versus Biden map because since we last have spoken, a lot of things have occurred. And with these change of events, I think that this scenario could completely be shifted around from where I last had it because ultimately I think the situation in the country has changed a lot. But before we do begin this great analysis, I want to remind you guys to like, subscribe, and to turn on post notifications to be up to date with our latest content, and also that channel memberships are now open. If you would like to become a Purple Political Talk channel member and support the channel, you could do so by pressing the join link down in the description, or the join link also next to the subscribe tab. So you can do any one of those. And in that spirit, I did want to give a very big thanks to our Purple Political Talk channel members, David Maxwell and Adam Hurst. We really could not do this without you. So now that I've gotten all of that out of the way, let's get started with the video. So, I think that a lot of things have certainly changed. And I don't think that Biden and the Democratic Party is looking at the same 2024 race that they probably were looking at 3, 4, 5, 6 months ago. I think the playing fields has completely been shifted around, and there's a lot of things to give as a result to that. And there's minor things that in the long term will be minor things like Afghanistan and things like that, which people are going to be thinking of, but people are not going to be. That's not going to be the main reason they're going to cast their vote for or against Biden or Trump. But I think it's other general trends that we're seeing, including but not limited to the economy, that could have long-term impacts on this race. And yes, we're still far out from 2024, so again, take these predictions with a grain of salt. But at a general level, I think that this race has shifted a lot in certain parts of the country, and ultimately I think that Donald Trump is at a better point of view right now than he probably was in a while. And, I think a lot of that has to do with Biden's increasing unpopularity. And I think that, if you go back and think about it critically and analyze the 2020 election, Trump did not lose by that much if you're talking about the Electoral College. In the Electoral Colleges, that votes that he needed could have been won by flipping, 100,000 votes or less than 100,000 votes across multiple states. So, this race was close. And I think that ultimately this also kind of gives us a sign that, come 2024, the country could be a close election. And with the current trends we're seeing and, analyzing both factors, I think that all factors rather are pointing to an extremely close race. So on your screen right now, you're going to be finding the safe states. These are states that would go to, by a safe margin of over 15%. To either candidate. These are states that, for the most part are traditionally, very safe states. So, they would traditionally vote for one party. There's some exceptions that, have recently swung into this category. But for the most part, that is what we're looking at. But now that we've gotten all of that covered, let's move on to the toss-up states and the states that really matter. And they're going to be decisive factors when it comes to this election. So let's start off with likely states, which are states that would go by less than 15%. But more than 5%. So let's take a look at this. So I'm going to start off with Joe Biden and where I think he's still going to do pretty well. I think that one of the big characteristics that we're going to end up seeing is the divide between working class voters in rural areas, the divide, and in other general areas of the country, and suburban voters. I think that's something that we might end up seeing, and that's going to be a very big trend we can see. With that said, I think there's certain places that Trump could easily, lose to Biden because one of the things we have to think about Trump is yes, he has his unpopularity issues from his, presidency, his past, and, the last couple of days / legacy of his presidency. But, he's going to do bad in most suburbs. If there's some scenarios where in certain groups of suburban areas, he's going to do well. But at a general level, a lot of these suburban voters are college educated are likely to vote against Trump. And, I think that one of the things that really has changed in this race is the economy is in a completely state. I think that come 2024, and I don't have a crystal ball and I can't predict what's going to happen, but basing it off trends we have now, how things have been headed, with inflation, with things like that, we're in for a very big, economy, some sort of recession. Maybe it's not with jobs, but in certain ways, we're going to feel an economic kick. And that's going to affect certain regions of the country. But in more suburban areas like Virginia, like New Hampshire, Colorado, New Mexico, the Biden administration is going to be able to hold on because they have built such big bases in these areas that it's truly going to be pretty difficult to lose. So that covers why I think, Biden would win in these areas. It's mostly, suburban areas, Colorado, Virginia. New Mexico is a little bit different, but I think 5% is doable for the Democrats there. And New Hampshire is a state that could be close if it's not Donald Trump. I think that in New Hampshire, I think the Republicans do have a chance moving forward or winning these races. It's just the Trump rhetoric that really could hurt them in the race. So that covers the Democrats. Let's move on to the Republicans. I think the Republicans come 2024, they're going to build a big coalition in Iowa and Ohio. I think that based on where, demographically the state has voting, with rural areas starting to trend more red. And I think truly people underscore the fact that without the rural areas going red, these states would not be as safe as they are today. And, I think that moving forward for the Democrats is going to be a very difficult task for them to see, win in these states simply because they lost a big part of the electorate that voted them in the first place, the rural areas. And then there's states like Texas, which, they've been trending a lot further to the left. But as we get closer to this election, I think that there's parts of this country that are still completely upside down from the pandemic, politically. And I think the 2020 election was a very crazy and, election that we've probably never seen before. And, I think a lot of those trends might have to do with the pandemic and moving forward with a lot of different things. I think that right now, where the Democratic Party is, it's not going to be enough for them to get closer in Texas because they are in power. And I think that another thing that people do underscore is that, yes, they are in power, so in a certain way, they do have the incumbency advantage. But over the course of the last couple of years, we're seeing a trend where being in power is really hurting you more than helping you. Whether it is, going narrowly less in electoral vote count, whether it's actually being a one-term president. And I think that for Joe Biden, again, we also have to acknowledge that he is someone who's getting older, whose frailness might come into play. But I'm really putting those factors aside. If Joe Biden chooses to run, it's likely because he thinks he's up to the job. And considering that being the scenario, I do think that, he's going to face the same incumbency things that a lot of incumbents in the past couple of years have faced with losing support in certain regions. And I think Texas is going to be a perfect example of that. And I'll go as far as saying that Florida could be enough to go by a likely margin for the Republican Party. And a lot of people might be saying, what are you doing? But I think that ultimately the state of Florida can continue to go further for the Republican Party. And truly for the Democrats to stay the same or improve, improve, I think they're really going to have to blow it out in Hillsborough, Pinellas, Jacksonville, Southwest Florida, which, again, it's doable, but generally speaking, where the Republicans currently are and how voters in Florida vote on certain issues like the economy, I think it's going to be fairly easier for, the Republicans to win here than, other times in the past. So that covers pretty much all of our likely states. So let's move on to lean states. Lean states are going to be closer states that are going to fall between the margins of 1.5% and 5%. So pretty close. So let's go on and cover the lean states for the Biden administration. So for Biden, I think that there's certain regions of the country that, again, he's going to perform well in, right? I think you're talking about Minnesota. You're talking about Nebraska. We're talking about Nevada. These are general regions of the country that they still have Democratic bases. I think places like Minnesota could narrowly, diminish a little bit. I think that one of the big reasons why Minnesota went so blue in 2020 was because of the social movements that were taking part in the state. And as tensions cool down and people start focusing on other issues like the economy, and I think that 2024 election, the economy is going to be center stage because we're pretty much, quote unquote, recovered from the pandemic at that point. And it's going to be a real sign that, what's really going on. And ultimately, I think that one of the big, scenarios that we could see in this election is, and based on the trends and what I could predict at this point, remember, this is just a prediction, that the economy is not going to be in the best state that people would want it to be. And I think people might look in hindsight and say, Trump's a pretty bad, has bad personality or rhetoric, if you will, but they're gonna say his policies, they make sense. I think that's a thing that might start clicking with people over Biden, and I think as Biden gets older, that's certainly going to be something that's going to be a lot harder for him to deal with. So places like Minnesota, Nevada, and Nebraska, these are places that even that though the what things I just said are really going to be factors, they're not going to be as big factors here. They're going to be factors here, but we're going to see those in action. These states, I think the Democrats still have enough support to end up winning. Now, as for the Republicans, there are certain parts of the country where I still see them doing better. I think Maine's 2nd District, which is an area that a lot of people, I'm going to actually put it as likely states so you guys don't scream at me in the comments. But I think that this is a part of the country that could, start shying away from Trump based on its, geographic location and things like that. And, it's a very conservative region. But I think that ultimately we must analyze the fact that many voters in Maine and the Democratic Party in Maine have really organized to go against Trump. And I think it's something that could end up, playing a factor. But I think ultimately the Republicans are going to carry this district for a very long time. But, other than that, I think that we could end up seeing in the lean column, rather, is states like North Carolina. I think the Republicans could solidify support here. And I think that's the only state we would see under this column, because I think that this race, while they may shift, a lot of states could shift politically in my eyes, one of the things we must analyze is that it's still going to be a close race. I mean, I think that come 2024, you're going to see a lot of these, swingish states probably flip. And I'm going to tell you why I think a lot of these seats flip. But I think that, at a general perspective, we're still going to have a country that's split right in half. And a lot of people fail to analyze the point that we have a country essentially split in half. And what is that going to cause? That's going to cause divisions, nobody who's in office. So I think it's something that's going to be very interesting, and I'll get into this as I now talk about the tilt states. So remember, tilt states are states that would go by less than 1.5%. So again, pretty close. So when it comes to the tilt states, I do think here that places like Arizona, places like Wisconsin, places like Pennsylvania, I think these are general regions of the country that the Republican Party could start to do a lot better and win by by tilt margins. And it being tilt margins, I mean, it's still a close victory, but it's a big swing after all. And ultimately, I think that the big thing that, comes into play here is the economy, especially up in the Midwest. And I would go as far as saying that Trump could win Michigan. Come 2024, Biden's frailness would, be a subsidiary factor. But I think the economy, especially in these states, are going to be a big issue. I was reading an article the other day. Ford and Chevrolet, General Motors, they have shut down production in these states. Why? Because there's no ships. And, this might be a problem now, but in the long term, this could have very big consequences, similar to the same type of environment that we saw in 2016. And what does that environment create? That creates a lot of people with need. And I think in the way that these states have voted in the past, like 2016, and I think 2024 could be a similar type scenario for this region, that there was growth for a certain period of time, but then it declined again, with how things are currently going. I think that the Midwest is a region that could end up turning back to Trump. And Arizona is a state that I think that the Republicans have a chance of winning. I mean, I think that a lot of suburban voters here would, again, vote for Biden just because Trump's rhetoric. But I think that as other issues start prevailing, immigration and things like that, we might see the state flip. We also must remember the 2020 election. I mean, if it was really, if you did an election based on actual issues and not COVID, I think you could have seen a whole entirely different map, because again, Biden didn't really have a platform. His platform was just getting rid of Trump because his rhetoric was bad, and get rid of COVID, right? And I think with that not in play, I think we could have seen a better results for Trump in, Maricopa County with immigration policies and things like that. But that leads me to the state of Georgia, and very interesting call. I do think the state of Georgia would actually fall to Joe Biden when it comes to this race. And a lot of people have been saying, what are you doing? But I think ultimately there's not as many like Republicans in that group that flipped, along with high African American turnout, that would actually flip and vote for Trump. And I think that the factors in Georgia are not going to be, as big as felt in some of the other states like the Midwest and possibly Arizona with the issue of immigration. And ultimately, I think that leads me to making this prediction that I think Georgia is going to be a state that's going to start, isolating itself from a lot of the other swing states. And I think, it's not going to really make up any part, of these like political regions like the Midwest. You could call it like the Southwest. I don't think that the Southeast is as related politically. And I think Georgia is going to be a great example of that. And how I think it really has a chance of splitting away from the Democrat or for the Republicans and going once again for the Democrats. And, I think ultimately at this point, it's something that's really likely to happen because of the reasons I mentioned. And I think, honestly, Trump, out of all these states that went blue in 2020, I think that Georgia is the least likely to flip back. And that brings me to my final prediction. Donald Trump at 290 electoral votes to Joe Biden's 248. So this is actually a very fun prediction to make. And ultimately, I think this race has changed a lot, mostly with the factors with the economy and things like that. Could have long-term impacts. So, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If so, please give it a huge thumbs up, like, subscribe, and turn on post notifications to be up to date with our latest content. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope you guys enjoy your Labor Day if you're watching this on Labor Day. Of course, you could be watching this later on, so it's not Labor Day, but you know what I mean. So, guys, again, thank you guys so much for watching, and goodbye.